I call the meeting of the Urbana Historic Preservation Commission to order. Today is Wednesday, the 3rd of August, and we are ready to have the call to order, please. I should add it was 7 o'clock when we opened the meeting.
7 o'clock, yes. David Hayes, are you on the phone?
I am. I have to say it's very difficult to hear. It's extremely muffled for some reason.
Yeah, can't hear you either,
Can you
David.
hear me all right?
Barely.
If you can speak up a bit, and UPTV, if perhaps you could turn up the volume on the phone?
It's the sound is so garbled. I'm not sure what's being said. But I think.
David, why don't you go ahead and hang up and try calling back in, and we will come back around to you for roll call.
Okay, I think you just asked me to call back, so I'm going to try to do that right now.
Okay, moving on to Alice Novak,
Here.
Laura O'Donnell,
Here.
Dennis Roberts. Here. Trent Shepard,
Here.
Angela Urban, and Andrew Weiss.
Here.
Is that David ringing in? Okay.
David, are you here?
Yes, it's still pretty garbled, but yes, I'm here. I'll do the best I can to listen.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll do our best.
Why does it sound like he's clear over there?
It's ceiling speaker.
Oh. Okay, next we have no changes to the agenda, so the next item is approval of minutes from previous meetings. Can we start, Marcus, with March 2nd instead?
Yes.
All right. Minutes of March 2nd. Anybody have any additions or changes to those?
No,
There was a typo somewhere, Trent, I thought.
I didn't catch it.
Sorry. No, I'm not catching it either. All right, is there a motion to approve for the minutes as read on March 2nd?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Moved by Laura, seconded by Trent. All those in favor signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Minutes are approved unanimously, including David's. We heard your aye, good, David.
Yes,
All right.
I said aye.
The next item is the September 1st minutes, the closed session. If we don't, do you want to say that, you know it better than me? Okay.
If there are no questions or discussion about the minutes of the closed session meeting, then you can elect to go straight into voting on them, which has to be done in open session. If you want to discuss them, we have to vote to close open session and go into closed session, where you can then discuss the minutes, vote again to come back out of closed session into open session, and then vote on the closed session minutes. Do you wish to discuss them or just vote on them?
I have a question.
Absolutely.
Not discussing them,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I saw them. Were they in with everything?
They're on your,
They're-
yes, they were not included in the packet
they're-
because they're
that's-
confidential.
okay, all right.
It's simply that
All
one
right,
sentence
Let me look.
set of minutes. Sorry, I should have told you that there was
I didn't.
something
I should
for you
have
to
looked
look
at
at.
the paper. All right, I have no questions.
All right, could we have a motion to approve?
I would move to approve the minutes as presented here.
Second?
I second.
Moved by Trent, seconded by Laura. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
I'd like to
Was that a
abstain.
David?
I'd like to abstain because I haven't been here for the closed session, so it's kind of pointless for me to comment on it.
All right, so we have an abstention from
Okay.
Dennis. That makes sense totally.
And what did David do? Did he say yes or no?
He said
yes.
aye.
Or no.
Aye on the, okay.
David, I believe, voted yes to
Okay.
approve the closed
Okay,
session
very
minutes. Did anybody hear any different.
I just thought it was so much later, I wasn't
Okay.
sure when he was doing it.
David, could you restate your vote on the closed session minutes, please?
I think you just asked if I voted to, did you just ask if I said like aye to approve them?
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Okay.
I said aye, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Um,
Everybody? Oh, yes, introductions. We have new people to introduce. Andrew Weiss, over here, has been to a Zoom meeting, but this is his first in-person meeting with us. And Andrew is in landscape architecture, and you're program director for,
On the planning director for the Champaign Arctic.
okay, very good. And Dennis Roberts, our newest appointee,
Hello.
and,
Hi, I'm Nick Olson. I'm the city's newest planner.
We
Okay.
need planners,
all right.
yeah.
All right, welcome, everybody. Hope you enjoy the experience. Next item is written communications. Marcus, do we have anything?
There are no written communications.
Okay, next item is audience participation. We ask that unless you want to speak about something that's not related to 710 West Oregon, that we'll have a public hearing for in a second. Does anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to make about historic preservation in general? I see no hands. Thank you for being an audience, though. We have no continued public hearings, no old business, so the next item is new public hearings. I hereby open public hearing HP-2022-L-01, a request by Brian Adams on behalf of Denny and Charles Hubert Sr. to designate the Charles and Eudora Van Doren House at 710 West Oregon as a historic landmark. We have a really regimented procedure that we have to go through, and we'll start with the staff presentation.
Good evening, members of the commission. Thank you for being here tonight and participating. I will mention that the nominator, Brian Adams, is here tonight. The nominator, Brian Adams, is here tonight, as well as the property owner, Denny Hubert, who he is nominating the property on behalf of, and she consents to the nomination. Mr. Adams has submitted an application to designate the Dr. Charles and Eudora Van Doren House located at 710 West Oregon Street as a local landmark. Should the application be approved, the owner would be required to obtain a certificate of appropriateness from the HPC for future exterior changes to the property, including any proposed demolition, as per the requirements of the zoning ordinance. The Van Doren House was built in 1915 for Dr. Charles and Eudora Butts Van Doren. It's located in the Sarah M. Halls subdivision of the Campbell and Kelly's addition in West Urbana, and was designed by their son, famous architect Robert Guy Van Doren, in the Tudor Revival style. Charles was a practicing physician, operated several farms, and contributed to the Urbana community in many ways. Eudora managed several rental properties. Following Charles's death in 1933, Eudora lived in the house until 1942, when she sold it to Carl Hartman, the head of the zoology and physiology department at the University of Illinois. In the 1980s, Bruce Schertz lived in the house and operated it as the Schertz Bed and Breakfast. In 2001, it reopened as the Hubert House Bed and Breakfast, operated by the current property owner. The nomination application includes the main residence, the carriage house to the north, and the parcel itself, which is comprised of the east halves of lots 5 and 6 of Sarah M. Hall's subdivision. Prior to the subdivision of Lot 6, the Van Doren House family lived in a house at 712 West Oregon Street, built in 1901 at the northeast corner of the intersection of Oregon Street and South Busey Avenue. It was directly west of the current residence, which itself is on the former site of an outbuilding associated with the original residence. The Van Doren House exhibits many characteristics of the Tudor Revival architectural style, which are described in detail in the application. The house has been minimally altered over the years and retains most of its original architectural features. Some modifications include enclosure of the west porch, some modern siding on the dormers and gables, and asphalt shingles. This property has been nominated under 4 of the 7 possible criteria. They are, first, significant value as part of the architectural, artistic, civic, cultural, economic, educational, ethnic, political, or social heritage of the nation, state, or community. Second, associated with an important person or event in national, state, or local history. Third, representative of the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type, inherently valuable for the study of a period, style, craftsmanship, method of construction, or use of indigenous materials, while retaining a high degree of integrity. And finally, identifiable as an established and familiar visual location or physical characteristic. The staff report relies heavily on the nominator's information provided, and staff analyzed the criteria and the information that was provided, and the report goes through the criteria and gives a staff analysis of those. For the first designation criteria, significant value, this was formerly agricultural land, and the addition at the time was at the far southwest corner of the city of Urbana. The growing significance of the University of Illinois influenced the development of this West Urbana neighborhood, as did the establishment of Carle Park through the combined efforts of Margaret Carle Morris and Dr. Van Doren. The development of Carle Park initiated a significant building boom in southwest Urbana that provided work for local architects, laborers, and building supply companies, and spurred continued expansion of the city limits to the south. For these reasons, city staff recommend a finding that 710 West Oregon qualifies under criterion A, as it has significant value as part of the economic and social heritages of the city of Urbana. The second criteria, association with an important person or event in national, state, or local history. As detailed in the application, Dr. Van Doren contributed to the community in many ways. In addition to his medical practice, he served on the Urbana School Board and created Van Doren Heights, a subdivision that expanded the residential limits of the city to the south and encouraged additional development of the area. He also, as stated before, collaborated with Mrs. Margaret Carle Morris to create Carle Park, the third oldest park in Urbana, as part of the development in memory of her husband, Albert G. Carle. Van Doren also served on the board of the Kankakee and Urbana Traction Company, an electric rail service proposed to connect Urbana with other communities. For these reasons, city staff recommends a finding that the property qualifies under criterion B, as the house is closely associated with Dr. Charles Van Doren, an important person in local history. The third criteria, representative of the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type inherently valuable for the study of a period or style. Criterion C is a 2-part test. It must represent the distinguishing characteristics of an architectural type and retain a high degree of integrity of that style. I won't go through the whole staff report on this. I will hit some of the highlights. The house, built in 1915, is a unique example of the Tudor Revival style and was designed by their son, architect Robert Guy Van Doren. The Van Doren house exhibits features that can be classified within the parapeted gables and brick wall cladding subtypes, as defined by McAllister and McAllister. It's 2.5 stories with a simple rectangular ground plan and end gable roof. I've got some photos here. Here we have the Van Dorens, Dr. Charles and Eudora and their son, Robert Guy. This is a front photograph of the home provided by Mr. Adams, facing south onto the street, and then the eastern property line is along the alley. This is an older historical photo of the home. You can see that in this historical photograph, the west porch is not enclosed. One of the modifications from the very beginning is that that porch was then brick enclosed. And then we have a shot from the southeast showing the eastern side entrance to the home along the alley. One of the additional modifications is this lattice enclosure, if you will, over the eastern door. You can see the dormer siding and the siding also on the gables and the soffits. It's 2.5 stories. The house is asymmetrical with an off-center entry porch. On the east side of the facade, a front gable above a second-story semi-hexagonal bay window near the center and a 2-story wing on the west side. The brick chimney can be described as a combination gable wall and slope type. The house retains what I would consider a good degree of integrity with the following modifications noted: enclosure of the open west porch, modern siding on soffits, gables, and dormers, the wood lattice side porch entrance and storm doors, and asphalt roof shingles that replaced the original slate shingles. The carriage house / garage is located at the northeast corner of the lot. It was extensively renovated in the 1990s and won an adaptive use reward from PACA of Champaign County in 1995. It itself is a 2-story craftsman style structure with a simple rectangular ground plan. The first story is dressed red brick. The end gables feature box soffit ends and are clad in wooden shingles. The soffits appear to be original wooden beadboard. The carriage house itself maintains what I would consider a high degree of integrity, retaining most of its original construction, with some restored or replicated features such as the large double doors and 4 light dormer windows on the south elevation.
Do you have a picture of that you want to share with us?
I believe in the application. So here are a couple photos of the carriage house. This would be the east elevation, I believe, onto the alley. And then I believe this would be the south, yes, the south elevation.
Thank you.
And so staff recommends a finding that the Van Dorn House qualifies under criterion C, as it is both representative of the distinguishing characteristics of the Tudor Revival architectural style, and 2, retains a good to high degree of integrity. There are several criteria that it was not submitted under that staff agreed with that did not qualify, including it being the notable work of a master builder or designers, or a particularly fine or unique example of a utilitarian structure, or located in an area that has yielded history or prehistory. Criterion E, which is identifiable as an established and familiar visual feature in the community owing to its unique location or physical characteristics. The applicant submitted that they felt that the property should also be included under that criterion. Staff don't necessarily agree with that analysis, but it is completely up to the Historic Preservation Commission to determine how they would like it to be accepted. So a little explanation, since there is, differing beliefs on this one, it warrants a little bit of discussion perhaps. This criterion refers to a property having a visually distinctive location, such as at the terminus of a street, located on a public square or in a park, on a hill, or with a unique and identifiable roof line. So the Van Doren House is a good example of the Tudor Revival style, and granted is somewhat unique in the immediate neighborhood. The Newton Wells House, built in 1907, is at 803 West Oregon Street. It's a nearby Tudor Revival style home. Unlike the Van Doren House, it presents a symmetrical facade and has a stucco and shingle exterior. The Van Doren House has a somewhat shallower setback from West Oregon Street than the other houses on the block. And these were the characteristics that were provided in the application for this criterion. City staff do not find these to be exceptionally strong distinguishing fixtures, to be considered unique location or physical characteristics, and recommends a finding that 710 West Oregon Street does not qualify under this criterion as an established and familiar visual feature in the community. But that certainly leaves several other criteria that staff agree that it should be eligible for. The staff report goes through the summary of findings, which goes through all of the criteria and our analysis. In summary, looking at, going back to the presentation. In case HP 2022-L01, the HPC may find that the nomination meets one or more of the criteria for designation as a local landmark and approve the application, or B, find that the nomination does not meet any of the criteria for designation and denied the application. That means that it really only needs to meet one of the criteria. It does not have to meet all of them, a majority of them, or even all of the ones that it was applied under. In either case, the Historic Preservation Commission should include findings of fact in their motion. That could be referring back to the staff report and picking out which ones of findings of fact, or you could summarize your own findings of fact. And these findings should summarize your justification for finding that the nomination either meets or does not meet the relevant criteria. The vote required is a majority vote of those members present and voting, but with not less than 3 affirmative votes. Since the property owner consents to the applicant's nomination of the property as a local landmark, the Historic Preservation Commission has decision-making or authority in this case. If this landmark nomination had been done without the owner's consent, I believe it goes on to City Council for review, which is not the case in this case. HPC has the final say. Based on the application and staff analysis, staff recommends that the HPC find the landmark nomination for 710 West Oregon Street conforms with criteria A, B, and C of Section 12.5C of the Urbana Zoning Ordinance, and approve the application with findings of fact as stated in the summary of findings. That's the end of my report. I'm happy to answer questions. And again, Mr. Adams is here, as well as Denny Huber is here as well.
Thank you, Marcus. Do any commissioners have any questions of Marcus? If not, oh, did you have a question?
Perhaps for Mr. Adams?
Yeah, okay. It's their turn now. Okay, thank you. And who wants to speak for the nominated property? Is that going to be Brian? Denny?
Well, thank you all for coming tonight and considering this nomination. I'm here to answer any questions you might have. I always enjoy doing these sorts of things. I like doing the research, so I'm always up to help somebody who wants to add to the historic record of the community. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
I had a question. Was there not a great deal of information on Robert Guy Van Doren?
That's was my finding. I did a lot of searching. I couldn't find a whole lot about him. As soon as he graduated from the university here, he moved down to
Oklahoma or?
somewhere south,
Yeah.
yeah, Oklahoma, I think. Had joined up with a firm down there. Couldn't really find any examples of buildings he worked on. He had some input into an Oddfellows Lodge. I think it was a renovation. And then eventually he was back here in town in Urbana, and then eventually moved to Detroit, and he was employed by apparently a well-known architectural firm in Detroit, but as far as his contributions, I really couldn't find out anything concrete. I didn't make any trips to Detroit to search out the records there, but so this was really the only building that I could come across that he was definitely the lead architect and designer on.
Thank you. Did you have questions? Dennis, did you have a question?
Not being the senior member, I would defer to anybody else first if you want. Okay.
You go.
All right.
Mine's minor.
Well, hi, Brian. Thanks for bringing another really well-prepared nomination for historic landmarking to the city. I think that without your diligence, we would probably have a lot fewer, and I think that it's obvious that you've prepared extremely well. Some of the things that you included in your report I found very interesting. I don't think I'd ever heard about the traction company that Mr. Van Doren had tried to establish, and it was interesting to hear his plan to try to increase the economic prosperity of the community by extending a traction plan route to north to, I know it went to Paxton, but it was headed to Kankakee and south as well. And it just never was completely built, and then it was became economically unfeasible because of the advent of the rise of the automobile and that kind of distribution and hauling. So, you know, these different modes of transportation have their day, and then they seem to be passing. So that was interesting, I thought. And of course, the fact that he went to Detroit, as I grew up in Detroit, I thought, well, how curious. And I wasn't really aware of architecture at that time, but if I ever get back there, I may have to look this guy up.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the house and how its current state. I think it does represent the Tudor style, but because of the modifications, it's not as apparent. But one of the things about the Tudor style are the exterior timbering and stuccoing, and we see that on the earlier version of the house, a historic picture of it from, well, its creation and also even in 1975. And some of these features have been hidden sort of pretty much by modern paneling and roof, cladding. The one thing, I'm not going to say that it's not a Tudor house, but it's not like maybe the most clear, obvious version of a Tudor home. But I wanted to ask you about the parapeted, what is it? Tudor parapeted gabling? Is that what it is? That's an aspect of the Tudor building that I'm not really aware of. Do you have information about what that style? Apparently, the entryway, which is brick, has a rather impressive. It's an impressive entryway, for no doubt about that. And what part of that is the parapeted part? I guess I wasn't sure about that.
The
Teach me
peak-
something here.
Yeah, the peaked the pediment over the actual entrance on the entryway there. There's a picture, I believe, of the current house taken from the side, and you could kind of see how that pediment is kind of a prominent feature if you look at it from the side. And based on my readings of the architectural types, that's typical of what's termed a parapet
I see.
style or version of
It's not the fact that it's,
variation.
it's not the fact that it's set up in front of the house as a separate kind of like vestibule entrance, but it's the architectural style of the peak over the door, actually.
That's my understanding.
Okay, yeah. It is a little bit unusual and it's raised, so it's kind of a beautiful aspect of the house. And then it currently has this metal grilled fence, I think. Is that still on the house today? The fence around the building. But was it fenced earlier? It didn't seem to appear in any of the photographs. Just was wondering about that.
Not to my knowledge. Denny could probably tell you if
Yeah,
Are you
okay.
talking about the stuff in front of the windows?
the
No,
metal fence.
the grilled fence
Oh, no,
on your property.
I had that put in 1986.
Okay.
The students taking things out of my yard.
Okay, I don't think the public heard that, so maybe we can say that that was it was added in 1986 to keep things from accumulating in your front yard.
Bob Shaver did it for me,
Okay,
and they kept taking the big
Okay,
garden area.
we'll give Denny a chance to come up and answer questions too.
okay.
She wasn't on mic. Any other questions of Brian?
I do. So their two sons, both were Pulitzer Prize winners. And I did spend some time looking through the autobiography of Mark. And, I mean, they grew up, well, they didn't grow up. They spent part of their youth next door in the older house.
Yeah,
And talked about playing in the boneyard,
yeah,
branch down the street, which is now underground, which I thought was interesting to know that at that point it was still above ground, and they called it the boneyard
Yeah.
right there, even though it was just a branch of it.
yeah,
And Mark even talked about helping his parents move into the new house.
yeah,
And he was certainly a prominent person, and maybe he didn't go to Urbana High School while he lived there, or even the University of Illinois, but he would have certainly stayed there, and he was around, and he was mentioned somewhere. What's the other brother's name? I forget right now.
Charles.
Charles, yep. But
Well, I think,
they're, I wouldn't forget totally about them and I mean, maybe that was part of the reason the parents wanted a new house, was maybe so that they're expecting their grandchildren to come and stay there who knows, you don't really know, but I think they're just a little adjunct of that family and the important things that came out of them. And then even Mark's son went on to some fame too. So it was a prominent family in Urbana
yeah,
that, as far as I know, are gone, but
well,
they were prominent for a long time.
yeah, they moved from rural Vermilion County into the house on the
Yeah.
corner that's gone now. And I believe they went through high school here and attended the U of I. But it
That was before, I think, this house was built.
And in the autobiography, which has got a lot of really interesting stuff about Urbana,
Yeah.
in the first chapters,
Yep,
I think it was just as the two of them were getting ready to head off to college was when they made the move. So I wanted to try to tie them into the house more, but other than the fact that Guy designed it,
right.
their careers really took off when they went out east and they went to Columbia
Yeah.
University, were writers and
And I agree
poets.
with that approach he took.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I didn't feel like I could really play them up as, reaching their fame and notoriety while they were here.
I totally agree. Yeah,
But they are fascinating stories
Yeah.
with the two sons.
yeah.
Any other questions of Brian?
No, I've got at least one for Denny, though.
Oh, okay, all right. Will the property owner come up, please, to present evidence in favor? And, oh, both mics are on.
Well, you know,
Did you have anything you wanted to tell us about the property before we ask you questions?
sure, I've lived there since 1985, but growing up, my property in Tuscola, where my parents lived, and my sister still owns the house, joined with the Van Doren property,
Oh.
Guy Van Doren. He and his wife were my neighbors, and she would always give me cuttings and clippings from the flower gardens at the property, and they're still in the yard down in Tuscola.
Wow.
And so I got to know their whole family through reunions that they had, and some of them are still buried down in Tuscola, but other Van Dorens are buried right here in Champaign-Urbana still, Woodlawn, and then another part of them are over in the one next to the U of I. And,
Can you
They-
pull the mic a little bit closer, please?
oh, sure. And I've got a gravelly voice anyway, but anyway, their family, they're just so interesting, because when I was going through the attic of the house years later after I got in there, I found all these documents from the YWCA, and she was one of the founders. Dora Butts was one of the founders of the YWCA, and she has these beautiful pieces that I saved and framed because she was a school marm in Ohio. And so I saved all those things, and she obviously liked them. And I found all these really neat posters of the YWCA in the turn of the century, whenever it started, and just reading the books that they wrote. And when I restored the carriage house, I was so surprised, because after I started tearing out parts of the walls, I found there had been a fire in the carriage house. And so I went to the library and looked it up and found out there was a carriage house fire, and it was, it burned extensively the very back wall. And it was an oil lamp that caught in fire in there. So when we restored it, we fixed that, but it was kind of fun to see where the fire had been. And then in one of his books, he wrote about the fire in the carriage house, which was kind of neat. And when the boys moved here from Hope, because there were 3 towns called Faith, Hope, and Charity, and they lived in Hope, and Hope's the only thing that's left. So anyway, their mother and father founded a church there with other people in the area, and they still fund that church through a foundation that they formed. And so I went up and visited the church, and it was really neat to see that too. And just the boys sold their horses when they moved to Urbana, and they moved over on High Street across from Allen Booth. They moved over there on the corner house. And so then they moved back to the big house later on. I think they actually lived in 4 homes altogether in Urbana. But it was so fun to read how they would go digging around in the Boneyard Creek area, and they were describing as things came in, and the street lights and the bugs and things. It was just, it's so wonderful. And then when I found out that 2 of the boys had won the Pulitzer Prizes, that was most of anybody in the whole United States in one family, supposedly. So I thought that was kind of interesting to find that out. And as you read his books, you find out so much about Urbana, including the horses, because they had to give up the horses. And when they built the second garage, all the neighborhood kids had horses too. So they asked their dad, couldn't you build a bigger garage, a carriage house, and we could bring back our ponies? So they went back to Hope and bought their ponies back that they had sold and brought them back to the house. And so they wrote a book about life with those horses and that transition in their life. But I don't know, I just love the house. It's got still the ring on the front where they would tie up the horse, and it's so interesting because it's a buggy house, and the buggy houses are the ones that are so tall. And I remember on Halloween one time, I kept feeling like somebody was looking at me, and I thought it's impossible because it's too tall. And it was 2 guys that were stacked on top of each other's shoulders, peeking through the window of the house. And so I just, you know, when you live in a house that's so tall like that, you forget about it until you go outside and you try to clean the windows and you get a new outlook on that kind of stuff. And Mr. Van Doren went in with Mrs. Carl, and he talked in his book about how sad he was about the fact that the traction business didn't work, and he talked about the incidences that caused the traction business to not work. And one of the books that he talks about, his son talks about, that he wrote, was that he drove back on the train and was with two different famous writers that you read about all the time right now. I can't think of their names, but it's in that book, and it's just so fun to read that. And I just love the house because it's stayed historical. What made me want to change it to this preservation status is because I decided to sell the house a few years ago, and a man walked in and he said, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to buy the house." And he told me, "I'm going to buy the house and I'm going to put a wall between." I thought, "No, you're not." So I took it off the market in about 10 minutes and decided, no, never, not unless I could get some kind of a designation like this before I die. So, anyway,
Well, that will not keep, if he comes back, that will not keep him from building that wall he wants on the inside.
He died.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right, any questions? Trent?
I do have one. When it talked about Bruce Shirts, your previous husband,
Uh-huh.
and him operating the bed and breakfast, I had always assumed that you were the operator.
I was.
So,
I founded it. We had the first legal
and,
bed and
and he
breakfast.
was there, he lived there.
He lived there, but he would go out and talk to people.
Yeah. And I would like to have it say that either you operated it, not Bruce Shirts, but it could say Bruce Shirts, or it could say Denny Shirts operated it, or operated it with
I
their
did.
husband Bruce, but it kind of sounds like, oh, Bruce had a bed and breakfast, but that's not really the case.
No.
No. So,
He and
Right.
I got married in '85, and
now,
Shortly
did you
thereafter.
live there first?
he did.
He did.
did.
Oh.
Bruce lived there
I'd
when I married
forgotten
him.
that,
I
yeah.
lived out in Rolling Acres out in Champaign,
Okay.
Savoy.
All right.
And so when I married him, he wanted me to move there because it was close to his parents, and I said, I don't want to, because it looked like a haunted house the day I saw it. I saw it the night before I married him, and I said, I don't want to live here. It's creepy, because it had the gutters hanging off, and it had 36 broken out windows, and it had knob and tube wiring everywhere in the house. It was horrible. And I said, I don't want to live in a house that looks like that. And he said, well, you could, remodel a little. And he said, I know you like to do that. And I said, I do, because I love to restore old homes. We used to own a construction company, my ex-husband and I did. And so I said, well, it would cost an awful lot to do that size of a house. And he said, like what? He said, maybe 5,000 here and 5,000 there. And I said, no, it's like 10,000 here and 30,000 there. And I said, it's extensive. And he said, well, if you're willing to sell your home out in the country and take the money and put it towards that house, we could do that. And I said, that's fine, as long as you don't protest about the restoration of the house. So that's why I did it, because I do love the house. I think it's beautiful. And
Yeah, I agree.
inside, nobody's ever painted the natural walnut. It's so beautiful, and it's got hard oak floors everywhere and tall ceilings and OG cove moldings, and it's just beautiful. It is.
Any other questions of the property owner?
No.
No? No questions? No. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak as either a proponent or opponent? No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we can discuss as a commission. Or if you'd like to go in and make a motion, we can do that too. We should discuss the findings at least. The city is recommending A, B, and C for the findings, and not including, I forget which letter it was, but not including the one that has wording about visible and distinguishable structure.
I personally don't feel a need to quibble about the different findings and whether there's a little something there that the staff didn't see. I'm fine with landmarking the house based on the ones that the staff findings support, and I believe that's enough. but if someone else wants to try to argue for one of the other ones, I'm not opposed to that.
I could make a comment. Is it okay? Okay. I found that the information that was included in the first finding, which is a significant value as a part of an architectural, artistic, civic, cultural, economic, educational, ethnic, and political or social heritage of a nation, state, or community, seemed to me to be one item that was particularly interesting to me, which we haven't really dealt with here or talked about, was that that the original owner and Mr. Van Doren purchased from Mrs. Mrs. somebody Carl. What's her name?
Morris?
Yes, Mrs. Carl Morris. 30 lots around the area that she wanted to create as a memorial to her husband, which is the Carl Park, and that those lots were purchased by the Van Doren family, and they were sold immediately because it was such a successful addition to the community, being next to the University of Illinois, and it extended the city's boundaries significantly to the south, which Oregon Street originally had been the terminus in the southern direction, followed by mostly agricultural property. And I thought that was a really interesting feature about the expansion of the community at the turn of the century, that this particular development not only became one of the most sought-after home sites in the community, but became the third park owned by within the city limits, and it is today still one of the most popular parks that we enjoy having in this town. So it's very strong support for the criteria number A.
Any other discussion? Questions? Everybody's got questions answered. Does anyone want to make a motion? Do you want to?
I will take a stab at it. I would move that, based on our findings under, I just jerked around again.
A, B, and C.
A, B, and C, are they?
Mm-hmm.
A, B, and C, in that it's significant value as part of the economic and social heritage of Urbana, that it's associated closely with Charles Van Doren, who is an important person in local history, and C is both representative of the Tudor Revival style and retains high degree of integrity. Based on those findings, I would nominate this and move, no, it's already been nominated. I would move that we approve this nomination, period.
I second that.
Okay. Been moved by Trent, seconded by Andrew. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Oh, we should do a roll call. Yep.
Roll call vote, Alice Novak,
Yes.
Laura O'Donnell,
Yes.
Dennis Roberts,
Yes.
Trent Shepard,
Yes?
Andrew Weiss,
Yes.
and David Hayes.
Yes.
Thank you, David.
Thanks.
And this, now I hereby close the public hearing for HP-2022-L-01, the request by Brian Adams on behalf of Denny and Charles Hubert Sr. to designate the Charles and Eudora Van Doren house at 710 West Oregon Street as a local landmark. It is now a local landmark. Thank you so much for your interest. Absolutely. Thanks, Mary Ann, for being our audience.
And we're still doing plaques, aren't we?
Yes,
Yep.
a little behind probably, but yeah.
But, Denny, okay with you if we put a plaque on your house? Yep. I suppose Dave Seiler, is he still doing them?
I think so,
I
yeah.
think so.
Yeah.
So someday.
All right, very good. All right, next item is new business. First thing is election of a chair. Or reelection.
So I haven't ever done elections for this commission before, so I will rely on you all to come up with some sort of procedure, perhaps open the floor for nominations.
I would like to make a
Voice
nomination.
nominations, and then we would close it. Alice, if you have a process for this.
That sounds fine.
Okay.
All right, I open the floor for nominations for chair.
I'd like to nominate Alice if she's willing. I know she has the experience.
That's true. I would love to do it again,
Okay,
but that doesn't mean that nobody else should be
that's
nominated,
correct,
so.
I guess.
Anybody else want to go for it?
When was, do you have any recollection, either one of you, when the last time we did this was?
About 20 years ago.
Well, I think when Kim came on Kim Smith came
yeah.
on the commission, somewhere around that time we had an election. But I don't really remember since then, to be honest.
Yeah, it's been a
So
long
I'm-
time.
it's interesting, and I'm happy that we're doing that. Okay.
All right, no other, I'll call the question then, and you guys have to vote on me or somebody else that you haven't nominated yet. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 For Alice, yeah,
And then we have to do a roll call vote for the actual election.
okay.
At least that's how my sheet
Oh, for the other,
tells me.
okay, so now we do vice chair, and then we have
No,
to,
are we gonna, we're gonna vote on this
Yes,
chair right now?
yes,
And then
oh,
we'll vote on vice chair.
yes.
Very good.
Okay, calling the roll for the election for chair of Alice Novak,
yes,
Laura O'Donnell,
Yes.
Dennis Roberts,
Yes.
Trent Shepard,
Yes.
Andrew Weiss,
Yes.
David Hayes,
Yes.
and Alice Novak.
yes.
And who, so I think we needed a motion and a second
I
for the
don't know that we-
nomination.
Oh,
of
no, Laura,
Alice.
did you second it, Laura? After I nominated Alice? I don't know that we did.
Okay, but.
I will.
Okay,
I will second it.
so I will put Laura down as the second and
Okay.
Trent as the mover. Okay,
All right, so we're okay on that, we can go into vice chair then, right?
yes.
All right. The floor is now open to accept vice chair nominations. Yes.
Now, I know it's his first meeting, but I would like to nominate Dennis Roberts, if he's willing, based on mostly what I perceive is a lot of experience with running a meeting. Coming from your city council days, and your longtime interest in historic preservation. So that's the end of my nomination of Dennis.
I nominate Laura O'Donnell. No?
And I was thinking of making a nomination. I didn't see her that seconded, so we're still open.
Yes.
I could nominate David Hayes if he's interested.
Would David Hayes accept a nomination for vice chair of the commission?
Oh, boy.
I think he'd be very good, David.
Happy to be in the running. Just for the sake of, yeah, sure.
Okay, so I'm gonna like ad lib this. David was nominated and accepted. Dennis was nominated. Dennis, do you accept the nomination?
I would accept it. It wasn't seconded, but I'm willing to do the work, yes.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so let's back up a step. Do we have a second for the nomination of Dennis? I'm not sure if this is.
I'm sorry, I had trouble hearing that last bit, so could that be repeated just for clarity?
Absolutely.
What
I
just
think we are going along on the premise that a nomination is a motion which needs seconded. So I am checking to see if each of the nominations has a second. So we are looking for a second for the nomination of Dennis Roberts as one of the candidates. Okay, hearing none, we will move on. Is there a second for the nomination of Laura O'Donnell?
I'll
for-
second. Oh, no, I'm sorry, sorry.
You made the motion.
I'm not
Yeah, yeah.
accepting the nomination.
You're not, okay, not
Take that
accepting.
back.
Okay, all right. And then David Hayes accepted the nomination. Is there a second for the
Second.
nomination? Okay,
Sorry.
we've got Alice backed up by Laura. Okay. And I will actually try and come up next time with some more concrete and maybe written down steps, because this all seemed a little muzzy to me, and that makes me uncomfortable.
I would kind of feel that seconding a nomination is not important or
Right.
not done, but I don't really know.
Right, and then if say multiple people had accepted and we end up with multiple candidates, then would we have to do like a secret ballot vote? I have no idea. I think very rarely are there more than one people running
Right,
for a
right.
thing. But anyways, we do have a candidate who's accepted and was seconded, David Hayes. So let's go ahead
Yeah.
and do,
I would have accepted had I'd been accepted with a second, but
you accepted as well?
Yes.
But we did not get a second for that. So feel like then we have one candidate. So then going on the voice vote for David Hayes as vice chair, I think I am now at, starting with Laura, vote yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Dennis Roberts,
yes.
Trent Shepard,
Yes.
Andrew Weiss,
Yes.
David Hayes, do you vote for yourself, yes? David, how do you vote on yourself
Okay,
as
yes.
vice chair?
Are you still there, David?
I hope we didn't lose
I
it.
am. It's
Oh, there he is.
Actually, Trent, your voice is the easiest to hear. Could you repeat what was just said?
Well, would you like to vote for yourself as vice chair?
Yes, I'm glad to vote for myself as vice chair.
Okay.
And Alice Novak.
Yes.
Okay, so we have 6 ayes for David as vice chair.
So David, you're elected vice chair, in case you didn't hear that.
Accepted. Thank you.
May I ask, what is the frequency then of these
Annually,
annually? Okay.
yes.
Should have been doing it annually.
Okay. Thank you.
Kim Smith was for a long time.
Was she did we have one after her?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No. All right, Marcus, then the next thing is bylaws review.
Yes.
Are you leading that?
Pardon?
Are you leading that for us?
I can, yes. So the bylaws were included in the packet. It is current as far as things like remote participation by board members. If there's anything that you would like to change in the bylaws, you can discuss it tonight and make recommendations, and then we can mark up the text of the bylaws and bring it back to the next month for a vote. If you love everything that's in the bylaws in its current fashion and simply want to renew it for another year, then you would vote in such a fashion. If you want to think about it for a month and say, oh, let me really look into this and see what we think about it, you can, table it for a month and rediscuss it again at the next meeting. Meanwhile, you could send me comments individually, and I could start marking up a text and then share that with you in the future mailing. Or, if you have any questions tonight about the bylaws, then this is an
I'll bring up
opportunity to discuss
one
that.
thing, if I may. Where is the part that talks about if you're able to choose to be a remote attendee?
Yes.
Where is that? You have to be away for business or family something, or I just can't remember where.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Under attendance, 3A, B, and C.
Correct.
Yep. And I have, for many years, been away during the winter and missed sometimes no meetings, sometimes one or two, which worked okay, I guess. Things went along without me. And then during 2020, when we were online for things, and I was attended from a parking lot at a motel in Australia one time, and I kind of enjoyed being part of it. And do we get to, are we following like what the city council rules are?
So
Could we make our own? Like if you just happen to be away, you could choose to, I don't know. I'm just curious how that,
You could propose to modify these to allow more leniency for things that you can then participate remotely in. We are currently no longer doing the video conferencing things since we're not
okay,
under COVID procedures.
all right.
So it would be
That's-
participating as
A phone
David is
call.
now by phone.
Okay, yeah,
I think what is in there now currently is kind of the standard. I don't
Yep.
think anybody allows for simply,
I happen to be away.
personal absence,
Right.
vacation, et
On
cetera.
vacation, yeah.
I could, if that was a question, I could bring that to, department heads and say, HPC would like to allow for greater participation for things like, vacation and stuff, especially over summers, especially if there's lots of faculty who are gone or in the field doing research.
Well, like last month, we couldn't get the quorum for the, but,
Well, and
yeah,
remote people don't count towards quorum.
okay,
They can vote if the people that are showing up in person make quorum.
oh, yeah, all right. And it's not a big deal, and I have no objection to leaving it the way it's presented here. And I would guess that the way David's doing this, just listening on the phone as best you can, is maybe not an ideal way to participate. So maybe it was just as well we leave it the way it is. And
And I
if I
will,
miss a meeting, I miss a meeting.
I will mention that it is only possible for one person to participate by phone
Okay.
now. It
All
is
right.
no longer like COVID where 27 people can be on a video conference.
Okay. All right.
I would like, I don't know about the rest of you, but I would like a month to go over things and actually read this. I don't feel like I have the time or energy right now to soak it all in.
Absolutely, and feel free if you have questions about things,
Okay.
email me,
Okay.
and I can find out answers.
I'm fine
Right.
with waiting a month.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Or do we want to wait till our next meeting we're having anyway, or have a meeting just for that, just for bylaws? Do we
I think we could wait till the next meeting that we're having.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many have we had this year? We had plenty. I kind of feel like we have. Or we have to have a minimum of 4, don't we?
So we are now in a new fiscal year. We go, I
Oh,
think,
so we're
the
just
whole
starting number
July-
one now.
Right,
Oh,
yes,
all right.
Okay.
July through June.
Okay.
Good.
And we did very well last year.
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, great. Thank you. It will be, yeah. Mhm. It will be old business, I guess. Monitoring of historic properties, is there anything?
If members did not do any monitoring, then I would defer any comments of mine to my staff report.
I've got one little thing. It's not a historic property, but it is well, anyway, the Mumford House.
Yes,
They're putting a new roof on the Mumford House.
yeah, and they put new paint on or siding or something.
I didn't see siding, but there is some, it's looking a little better.
Yeah, but why?
I
What's
don't,
going
know.
on?
I'm trying to keep it stable, I guess.
Yeah,
But I'm happy to see that
have you heard anything?
that they're doing a roof on it, and leaky roof is the beginning of the end of any building. So I was happy to see that they're putting a roof on.
Is this the Mumford House on campus?
Yeah,
Near
by-
Dirt, near
Yeah, by that
TDH?
McFarland chime, that
Okay.
thing, yeah,
yep.
yeah. So,
All right, thank you. I should have mentioned that too, so thank you. You're on top of things, Trent. Anybody else have any monitoring? Dennis?
I just want to ask that, Marcus, are you going to do the staff report, which is this sheet that you've given us that has bullet points on it, so we'll be able to make comments as we read them or hear them?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, staff report.
Okay, staff did a mobile workshop, walking tour of the Downtown Historic District in June for planners of the Illinois State section of the APA as part of their spring conference. We hope to do more of those for the general public, maybe focusing on smaller bits because we really walked them hard and saw several sites. We stopped at the Hotel Royer and got a bit of a tour from Joseph Pryor. We stopped at the Cohen Building and got a tour from Dan Maloney. We stopped at the Courier Cafe and talked with Alan Strong, and we ended up at the Boneyard and had city engineer John Zeman talked about Boneyard Creek. Staff did a really great job, and people loved it. And Kat Trotter and I will be participating in a panel at the fall conference talking about historic preservation tools. I'll be talking about case studies of the Hotel Royer and the Cohen Building, and how using historic tax credits can help revitalize your downtown. If you follow along on your sheet here, the certificates of appropriateness in progress or review, the Van Doren House was nominated tonight. I spoke with the chair about the Ricker House, and I need to prepare a certificate of appropriateness that's going to be administratively approved for a roof replacement that they did for hail damage. Work is pretty much done at 2 Buena Vista Court. I've requested an update from the owner. I'm pretty sure everything's done except maybe for some exterior stucco repair and possibly one basement egress window. Number 4 Buena Vista Court is completely done. Number 8 Buena Vista Court, there is a question about that. There were 3 certificates of appropriateness issued for that, and the property has transferred, and I am trying to find out if those certificates automatically transfer to the future owner or new owner, or do they expire because they were issued to that owner. The zoning ordinance, does not state whether they transfer or if they, expire. And also, if somebody doesn't start on a certificate or complete a certificate in a certain amount of time, do they expire? The pros and cons are, if work hasn't started, it's pretty easy to let that certificate of appropriateness expire. But if work has started but not finished and they're taking a long time to finish it, do we say you have a year or 2 years or whatever to complete it? Because if it's completely open-ended, then there's no real incentive for them to get it done. I am looking towards institutional knowledge. If anybody knows if we've ever had this asked or it's come up in the past, the bylaws don't address certificates of appropriateness like this. The zoning ordinance doesn't really. I can ask the National Association of Preservation Commissions on their forum. I could ask them, hey, do your certificates of appropriateness expire? How do you handle transfers? But before I aired our dirty laundry, I would, seek guidance from our own commission.
I kind of feel like they ought to have an expiration date, just to light a little fire under getting something done. And we've had a few that, it seems like in the last year or so, that have just kind of dragged. And as far as whether they would transfer to a new owner, kind of seems to me like it should, but I don't know what that's based on. Like, what if somebody died and their heir, whoever it was, wanted to continue? Should they have to start all over in the process? It doesn't quite seem like it.
It seems like it should go with the property, not with the
It
person
kind of
who
feels
owns
like
it.
that to me too, but I mean, what happens when a building permit expires, or somebody sells and they have a building permit out? I don't know that. It's kind of like a building permit in a way.
A building permit would expire if they stopped progressing on it, and then if they wanted to.
If they sold,
I think if it sold, as long as the work progressed, that's fine. Because I believe it's issued to the property as opposed to the owner.
I kind of feel that way about this too.
The certificates are a little more, I think, peculiar because it's work that they got approval for a certain fashion to be completed in a certain way. So you can't just let them not complete it, because then you're actually opening up the property to deteriorate, potentially.
Yes.
If a regular house started falling apart because you didn't finish the siding and it leaves a tarp on it for 6 years, part of us says that's kind of on them, but there are still, property upkeep requirements that the city has, but it's not really strong. But what I'm more looking at is what you would like to see. And then we can go from there and maybe work that into a zoning ordinance amendment to add in expiration dates and language about transferring to new owners.
It'd be interesting to know what Champaign does,
Okay.
or Elgin or someplace, but I kind of feel like it ought to go with the property logically, and it ought to have a termination date just to move things along and not have it just drag. But that's just, I don't know if that's common sense or what, but that's just kind of my gut feeling, based on not much
One
of
note-
anything.
One note from the sideline is that when we make determinations about certificates of appropriateness, we don't ask anything about the identity of the owner. So it seems odd that would be, tied to the owner, right? So it seems completely appropriate that it would transfer.
David, I will say, and I think Trent mentioned, that an applicant applies for those. So it is linked to being at least opened by the applicant.
Okay.
Similarly, though, to a building permit, I can ask our building safety division, hey, if somebody applies for a building permit and then it goes from that developer to a property owner, does the building permit then become the property of the new owner, or does it stay with them? And I can report back and see what building safety says about building permits.
Dennis?
Because the certificate of appropriateness is such an important tool for us to regulate and preserve what could be new construction that might change significantly a building that we've landmarked. I think that ultimately, whatever the decision is, and I think we probably want to find out and do some research on this, that we should also then write up a proposal for a zoning change in the zoning ordinance, or at least to clarify it so that it becomes clear for the future, and it becomes part of our system of ordinances. So I think that should be the ultimate result of our decision, is that we actually codify this. Take the ambiguity away.
Anybody else have any comments, questions? Nope.
Thank you for your guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Moving back to the staff report, moving down to the roof repair and the exterior repairs there at Hotel Royer, there were 2 certificates of appropriateness issued. I believe the roof repair was completed. I think occasionally new leaks are found and they continue to fix those. The exterior repairs, I heartily encourage folks to drive by and see how it is progressing. They have, I believe, finished the majority of the new stucco work outside and the painting of the addition. The trim has been finished on the addition, as well as they've replaced the vast majority of the cedar half timber on the historic section. We learned from SHPO that replacing the like with like cedar trim, they started going through and checking the integrity of the trim that was there and just the amount of water damage that came from that trim being attached directly to the brick and the water, wicking in from the back and then being caught up inside by the paint. As they started trying to repair it, it was just crumbling. So what they've done is they checked with SHPO and replacement of that cedar trim and staining like for like, same with similar original stain color was in the part of the original project scope of that project that was submitted to the National Park Service. So stop by and take a look. The west side looks really sharp. The cedar isn't stained yet, and it's coming along outside. They're repairing and replacing windows as necessary. They still are working towards their December 31st deadline to be open. And those are the main things about Hotel Royer.
I've got some questions then.
Yes.
I've got 3 questions. So could you clarify the new half timbering, which is one of the features of the Tudor style, that they're replacing, currently is kind of a tan color. I guess it's not stained. This is also true on the north side wing, the the newer Jumer wing. Is that going to be tinted darker, or is it going to remain light?
So they're treating the 2 halves separately. The northern addition, the color scheme that's there now is going to be the final color scheme. That engineered wood siding, it's not cedar, that's its finished color, as well as the stucco paint is that color. The historic portion is similar but different, and that cedar trim is going to be stained the darker brown to set it apart from the new addition.
Mm-hmm.
So they're using the color differentiation to differentiate. So it's not a mimicking, but a reflection of the styles between the 2 halves.
All right. And so does the commission feel comfortable that the timbering in the Jumer addition does not match? Is this a problem as far as the integrity of the Tudor style?
No.
Yeah, we discussed this.
Okay. I wasn't here at
A
that
while
discussion.
ago.
But
Yeah, no, and so Dennis was at the time on city council as opposed
I
to
know.
HVC. It was a long
Yeah,
discussion, and the applicant was like, we were directed by National Park Service and SHPO to not have them try and mimic each other or mirror each other, but be a reflection of, and it was suitable to differentiate by having different palettes of colors.
yeah. But
Okay.
there were plenty of questions about that, and
I
a
can
lot
imagine.
of discussion, and different views and everything, so, yeah, it has come up.
Yeah, because I walk by the hotel so much. I live right downtown. I just was watching the progress of it. What about the replacement of timbering in the blonde style, I'll call it, on the south-facing wall of the Jumer wing? I know that the previous owner ripped all that off and was going to put in some different kind of heating, cooling units, and I hadn't seen that there was a plan to replace those, but shouldn't they, because even though they're not visible from the street, they're visible from the front, and it would reflect, I could think, a more cohesive look to the entire building's style. And to have it just a blank stuccoed wall doesn't seem to have completed the intent of the restoration. So what's the status of that, and what are they going to plan to do?
What I can do, because I can't speak to it from memory, but I can certainly re-email out the packet from that certificate of appropriateness, which includes the renderings and elevations to show what will be happening on the south face of that Jumer addition. As I understand it, there is going to be some lattice work fronts that will be covering over those PTAC heating and cooling units. And there will still be the blonder half timber trim on that south side. There was a lot of trim that was removed under a previous certificate of appropriateness. A lot of trim was like falling off and was determined to be a public safety hazard, concerns about it falling on people as they were walking by. So a certificate of appropriateness was granted to not require that trim to be replaced. So there's a lot less trim on there than there used to be, 10 years ago. And that was granted by the Historic Preservation Commission.
So this commission did then approve the denuding of the timbering on the south side of the Jumer wing.
I'm not exactly sure if the south side was included in that. I know the north side of the Jumer addition, because I just looked at that last week, might have been the north and west or north and east sides. Again, I can pull out that other certificate of appropriateness.
Right. So I think they're doing a really good job on the visible sides, along Elm Street, the north side, and the front, which is on Ray Street. But, if you look at the building, if you've been there recently, they don't seem to have done any work at all at the same time, which you would have expected to complete that kind of timbering at all on the entire face of that two-story building facing south.
Of the Jumer addition?
Of the Jumer addition,
Right.
yes.
Yeah, I know they're still working on the mechanicals for that side.
Is that maybe one of the reasons why they haven't started working on replacing the timbering?
Possibly.
Do you think that they will?
I am confident that they will follow whatever
Has been agreed
program
to, yeah.
that they got approved by SHPO. And, we'll be looking at those. SHPO will come up for a final monitoring after they submit a self-monitoring report. So, it would be good for the commission to revisit that actual approved plan. One of the final decision that the HPC made at that meeting was they were comfortable following whatever project was approved by the State Historic Preservation Office. Basically acting as an overlay or secondary monitoring for that, as opposed to imposing another level of requirement on the applicant above and beyond the National Park Service standards, because their standards are pretty high.
So the Jumer wing is 50 years old now, or is it not? It was in the 70s that it was added, right?
83, I think.
Oh,
But, you know, it's part of the local landmark that is on that property already. And that local landmark takes a snapshot of what it was like when it was landmarked, not necessarily what it was when it was built originally. And, you know, it's the beholding, the requirement is to, if you want to modify it from what it looked like when it was landmarked, not when it was built, then that's what you have to get the certificate of appropriateness for.
Right.
So technically, if you wanted to remove something that was added post-original construction, you have to ask for a certificate to do that.
Well, it would be interesting to find out if you could provide us with information about whether the timbering on the south side of the Jumer wing existed when the landmark was made.
We can probably come up with some photographs and look at the
That'd be
photographs
perfect.
of that landmarking.
Yeah.
Again, the HPC did determine that they would follow whatever plan was approved by SHPO. So if SHPO,
And SHPO is?
the Illinois State Historic Preservation
Okay,
Office,
all right, thank you.
they're the ones that administer the federal historic tax credit program for the state of Illinois.
Okay,
So the applicant applies to the National Park Service for historic tax credits following the Department of Interior's, Secretary of Interior's technical standards for historic preservation. And National Park Service then funnels that to whatever state historic preservation office is their local administrator. They review the application, see if it meets the national criteria, and then they say yes. Or they say, don't take out the marble floors, or don't take out the oak baseboards. And then the applicant has to adjust their plan to go with those revised criteria.
okay,
In this particular case, the local HPC said, that's good enough for us. We will, because their criteria pretty much line up with the local criteria. And so we're not gonna micromanage.
all right, thank you.
Sure.
I just was seeking for information on that.
Absolutely. So
And-
what I can do is pull those old certificates of appropriateness and the plans that SHPO approves, so you've got some more information about how HPC actually determined that case.
Yeah,
2
okay.
years
I
ago.
mean, I just see it visually, and I'm just wondering about
Oh, yeah.
it, right?
Yes.
Okay, and what you just mentioned touched on the third question I have. I'm aware that a member of PACA who discussed with me this issue about 3 weeks ago or less said that they were invited to go in and to do some removals within the interior by the owners of the Royer Hotel. And so my question, and you just mentioned about whether it would be appropriate or not to retain or remove the marble flooring in the lobby or whatever. As my understanding is that if they want to receive assistance and national tax credits for their remodeling on the interior, that they would have to maintain certain historic aspects of the building, at least not to do a complete remodel of it, but they'd have to retain appropriate level of restoration. I'm not so much worried about the rooms, the individual rooms, because they really do need to be updated to be comfortable to any client who would stay at the hotel. But I am interested in the public areas of the building, which are, I think, well-known in the community and kind of legendary as far as like their unique quality and appearance. And so I would like to see the Historic Preservation Commission allowed to do a walkthrough of the interior in the next month so that we can just see what's happening in there and get an idea of what the restoration looks like, because I think it's important to the community, and it's certainly important to me as a member to be updated about just how things are going to look and what parts are being carefully preserved and what parts are being updated for more modernization for today's life.
So I spoke with someone from PACA several nights ago,
Yes.
and there was some issue of a pack of people meeting at the hotel, or that they met with Joseph Pryor, I think. And it was over furniture. It wasn't over architectural parts or anything inappropriate like that. It was with dumpy, moldy furniture. And it was so bad that PACA didn't even want it. So that's to clarify what it was.
Well, then, it doesn't matter to me about the PACA people then, because that might concern me either. But I am interested in knowing about the architectural interior as far as like the, cornices and, the paneling or whatever it is, carpeting or something what are the updates are going to be. Certainly, the Great Hall is a beautiful place, and, I'd be excited if they decided to take out the glass brick from some of the windows facing west and restored, window panes or something like that. If that was going to be considered an update in the modernization, that'd be exciting. But I'd really like to do a walkthrough.
They've given tours, I've been on at least 2, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'd like to, now, so much has been happening that I think that'd be wonderful to have a tour now to catch up.
Was it like 2 months ago?
We did one in May.
In May.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you? Well, then I'd like to have a tour.
Well, I think it'd be great if, and I'm sure they would take you, but I feel
So
like I just kind of.
is the commission then satisfied with what they've seen as far as the restorations go?
Absolutely. I was particularly impressed with the individual rooms redos, and they had redone some sample rooms, completely redone them. And the Hilton organization is just all over them.
Good.
They had nice sconces that I thought were beautiful on either side of the bed. And Pryor said that we have to take those down because the Hilton wants it frosted at the bottom of the light on the glass. I mean, that's the level of detail that they're looking at.
Well, would it be possible for me to look through it? Because I didn't get the option to do that, and
It's an interesting
very
tour,
important to me.
So maybe
Yeah.
they'll even feed you lunch.
I would accept that. And I'd like to maybe bring 1 or 2 people with me, possibly. Okay.
What I can do, especially because it is an active construction site.
Yep.
I can pass on to Mr. Pryor that we have a new HPC member who was not on the commission when the last tour went, and is kind of has an open-ish schedule. But if there is a time when he is available to do another tour, that you would like to take him up on that. And I can't make any promises, but I can certainly pass on your desire to see the restoration in progress.
Oh, yeah, I'm very interested. When I was on the city council, I served in, my ward was the downtown ward, and I've had many conversations with previous owners and this restoration project, some of the construction people. But I'm very curious about it, so thank you very much. I'd appreciate that.
All right, any other things from staff report?
I will buzz through real quick. We've had some additional discussion internally with the railing designs for 502 and 504 West Elm Street, and I'm working on those as time allows. We did get 508 West Elm Street, which is the Bill's house, so just 2 houses down from the Sutton and Freeman houses. They replaced the stairs last year. Our permitting software did not red flag it as a historic landmark, our new permitting software, so we're working through that. They came to us because they saw that they need to replace the railings as well, which have already been replaced once under a certificate of appropriateness. They're going to be applying for the railings as well as retroactively for the steps. And so that's going to be one C of A that's going to be coming through. Also, Brian Brower from UIUC, their offices are in 1108 Stoughton Street, which is the Warm Air Research Residence, which is it's on the National Register of Historic Places, and he was inquiring about having it listed as a local landmark.
Oh, wow. But the U of I owns it.
Pardon? U of I owns it, yes.
So they would nominate it? Is that the idea?
Yes. I told him, his questions were, how does the university owning it factor into it? And how does it being a National Register property factor into it? And I said, well, if U of I owns it, they can handle applying for the nomination, all that work that Brian Adams did, they can do.
He might even
And-
do some research for him. You never know.
And, exactly. And also, if it met the criteria for National Register, it will probably meet the criteria for a local landmark,
Yeah.
but we
But I
would-
was always under the impression that we didn't have intergovernmental designations and things against, so this would be the state versus the state, sort of.
Well, like if somebody else wanted to nominate it against their wishes, I think that would be problematic, but I don't know.
But you're saying it's supported, or they,
If-
I think somebody
if-
doesn't really
if-
understand
if
They
that.
U of
wanna do
I
it.
Nominates
They,
it,
they want to, they're interested in nominating it as a local landmark.
I wouldn't want to say no.
I wouldn't say no, but I just, I'm not buying what they're
We're
selling
not
right now,
used to
but,
that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Right. Well, and-
I mean, the Mumford House, that's local landmark.
Or maybe they'll, who knows, we can ask them.
If, and we can talk outside of stuff, but if, are there concerns about a U of I property being a local landmark? And the only thing is, they have to understand that if they want to work on the outside of it, they have to subject themselves to local review, which,
I
you
just
know.
think they're not going to want to be under any review. They're not going to want another,
I would think that so too.
Yeah.
But if they want to go, I won't say no to them.
all right.
I will impress upon them very strongly that we would require review of any exterior work, and, is your architectural review board going to be okay with that? And normally on campus, building safety here locally doesn't review building permits. I think all the building permitting and engineering review is done at the state level, just like public schools don't get reviewed by our building safety division. So I don't want it to be a landmark in name only, where the enforcement doesn't,
Right.
actually happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I think I would
agree.
probably want some written documentation from their architectural review board, or sign off by the Board of Trustees saying, we relegate ourselves to your authority if we want to do something. And they can always de-landmark it if they want to go through that hassle, but I'd hate for all of us to do all that work just to have it be
Right.
undone.
Right.
Okay, I will talk to them.
All right, you're done with staff
That's
report
it,
now?
yes.
And I wanted to mention that's an interesting house in that, it was essentially the first air-conditioned house in the United States.
Yes,
And also, it was in private ownership for a while.
okay.
My friend Katie Hunter, her three siblings and the mom and the dad, they all lived there for a long time and grew up there, and then the university bought it back.
Okay.
It's a pretty cool house and very solidly built, and a lot of that original stuff is still there.
Thank you.
Okay, we have no study sessions. Announcements, anyone? If not, can we have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved by Andrew, and we don't have to have a second. We're adjourned. Yay, thank you.
Adjourned at 8:38. Thank you.